What is up, guys? Welcome to the Friday night live stream on my channel. My name is Brandon Hicks, and I am a Blender Foundation certified trainer here to kind of give you a behind the scenes workflow on this channel for some of my streams. So what we're going to be working on is continuing a project that is based on influence from some of Pixar's animated movies. We're going to be trying to do our own animated movie in Blender, and I'm going to be using 2.8 to do that. So tonight, we're going to continue the project that we've been laying out. If you're interested in seeing those, you can head over to the channel, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. Give me 1 second to switch this over real fast. And I want to kind of share some things that I'm working on and did today on the channel. All right. Okay, so as you can see here, we're on my YouTube channel, and today I started getting in here and playing some more with the playlist and separating things out. So if you look at the playlist now, you can kind of see I've got several of the streams split into separate sections based on what we're doing. All of the previous streams that had to do with the animated shorts are in the Pixar-inspired animated short project playlist here. So if you're interested in seeing the past streams, those are there, as well as any of the concept art streams. And then I've got several under the 3D illustration live streams, about 21 streams. That's over 40 hours of content there. So yeah, a lot to explore on the channel and lots coming in the future. But for tonight, let's jump in and get to work on this project that you see here. So I'm gonna add in my webcam here. Okay. So before we get too far into tonight, I'm gonna do a little bit of organization, but I also want to talk about kind of the intent for tonight. And that is to create a basic block-in for the set where all the pieces are gonna be, furniture, things like that. And we're gonna get ourselves organized because as we get further into the project, we're gonna wanna start playing with things that might overlap into different areas of the production pipeline, such as lighting and things like that. And without having anything in place, it's really gonna be hard to kind of figure out what this needs to look like. So tonight I'm going to do a little bit of organization, but before we get into that, let me kind of show you what I've been doing in Photoshop today. Full screen here so you guys can see this. Okay, so this is the basic layout from a top view of the room that we're building. We've got some closet doors over here. Gonna put the dresser back in here with some clothes racks. Art desk is gonna sit in front of the window. Bed is over here with a little nightstand and a toy chest. And there's a lamp in the corner. And so what I'm trying to do at this point is just to give myself an idea of what this needs to look like so that I know what I'm gonna be building. And we're not going to get too worried about making things look pretty. It's just going to be more about getting the scale and proportion of these blocks in place. And then we're going to slowly start replacing those with the detailed objects as we get in here and start working on things. So that's kind of what I did to plan out what we're working on tonight. So I'm going to take this and throw this over on my other screen. And let's get into Blender and start getting organized. So I'm going to take a drink real fast, and then we'll get in here and play. Okay, so I've already gone through and kind of split things up. If you were watching one of the previous live streams, you can see that we've got all of the walls kind of in its own collection over here, so I can turn those on and off. And each individual wall also has its own collection, which is nice. The ceiling is kind of its own thing. So usually we're going to want to leave that off till we start rendering so we can build. But I also probably want to start turning off some of these walls. So while we're looking into the room tonight, I'm going to turn off the front and the left walls so we can just kind of see what this looks like. And then I noticed also that this monkey head is actually part of the back wall collection right now, which is not really what we want. So I'm going to move this into the main bedroom collection. So that way, when we turn the back wall off, the monkey will stay where it is. And this can just be a nice little stand-in for one of the child's toys right now. Now, one of the other things that is really nice with 2.8 at this point is that we have a lot of visibility options in the 3D viewport for how to preview the lighting and things like that. And so what I've done is I've actually turned off my lights so that we don't have to kind of have them in the 3D viewport getting in the way. but all of my lighting is toggleable in this little menu here. So I can turn on my lights and my cameras and stuff like that. You can also disable or enable the ability to select using this. And it's sort of the same thing you would have in the outliner, but if you want to get rid of the outliner so you're not having to see this in your menus, you can also use this little menu here, which is kind of nice. And I've turned off the gizmo so that we have a little bit more room to play with. I'm probably going to hide those menus. And I'm also going to look at keeping the wireframes on. But I think I'm also going to change some of the look here. So we're going to switch into look dev instead of the preview. And play with some of this. Now, if we turn the scene lights on, then you're going to have to enable these over here as well. You can see that you get a nice little preview of what some of that looks like. Now, our issue is going to be that we're using cycles here instead of Eevee, and so since we're not doing a real-time engine, this isn't going to give us a great representation. So I found that by switching back to just the basic solid viewport mode, but using some of the other viewing options here, we're able to kind of get a much clearer look at some shadowing and things like that. So you can switch to a single color, switch to a material, randomize your colors, which is kind of cool, and play with textures. But in this case, I'm going to use our material mode. In this case, we can pick 2 or 3 studio options, but I'm going to switch this over to matte cap. And then from here, we can actually pick several matte cap options, which give us some kind of more interesting things to look at while we're building things out here. So if it's blending in too much with the background, one of the nice things is being able to switch on one of these matte caps, which kind of helps separate the foreground from the background. So once you land on something that you kind of like, you can kind of stick with that, and it's going to apply it to pretty much everything in the scene. But you've got a lot of options. This one's for like automotive stuff, and it actually interacts with your materials. So if you have a material already in here and you pick a diffuse color, it's actually going to overlay the matte cap on top of the diffuse color, which is a kind of a nice feature that gives you a lot of customizing options for your scenes here. So I'm going to leave it on this matte cap because it's pretty straightforward. And then I'm going to try to reposition this head of the monkey so that it's sitting on the ground. A little bit better there. And what we can also do is play a little bit with some of these options here. So we have X-rays, which will let us see through the walls. Shadowing, we can turn on and off, different strengths here. Then we also have cavity shading, which is kind of like ambient occlusion. So having all those on, if your graphics card can support that while you're editing, is kind of a nice little feature to have. So with all of our things turned on here, you can see that the lighting is even previewed. So as we kind of move things around, you're going to see different things move around. I think the lighting as it is here is not coming from our lamps. I think that's actually coming from the lights that you would set up custom in the user preferences. So if you go to the lights here and you were to spin these around, you're going to see some of that update. At least I'm pretty sure that's where that's coming from. But anyways, so let's turn our walls back off there and let's start playing with some of our setup here. So I'm going to jump back into my Photoshop file and let's take a look at this. Okay, so each of these blocks in my little top view here layout is equal to about a foot. So that means that we're going to pretty easily be able to tell what the width and height should be for all of these little areas. And the only thing we're not going to be able to see is the height here. So we're going to have to kind of eyeball that. But in this case, we know the bed is going to be about 3.5, maybe 3 feet wide, and then about 6.5 feet long. So let's create a cube for the bed. Bring back up our transforms over here. And I'm going to use the dimensions to help me out. So on the x-axis, let's do about a 3.5 there. On the y-axis, let's do 6.5 there. And then let's say the bed, we can play with it being about that tall, but we're going to probably want to raise that off the ground a little bit. So maybe with the legs for the bed, it's about that high off the ground. And I'm not really sure. We'll play with this as we go. I'm not gonna get too fussy right now, but got a bed there. The chest is gonna be in front of it. It's gonna be about 3 feet wide, and about 2 feet in terms of the depth. So I'm gonna place that down there. It's gonna be about the same height, but for now, let's take this down to about, let's say 1.5 feet tall. And let's play with the desk position over here. And I'm gonna move this little monkey head forward in the middle of the room. And I'm just using Shift D to duplicate these around. So these are completely separate objects here. Now I'm gonna wanna align this with the window. So I'm gonna hit Z real fast to switch into sort of a wireframe preview. Place that there. And then this is gonna end up being about the height of the window base there. So we're looking at about 3 or 4 feet wide. So I'd say 3.5 maybe is probably good. 2 feet deep, and then maybe 3 feet tall. This is going to be at its highest point. So if this is going to be one of those art tables, and it's going to be kind of slanted if it's on a tilt there. So it's like a drafting table. And let's see, what else can we do? The dresser is going to be in the closet, so let's duplicate that. This one is, let's see, 3 feet wide. By 2 feet. Okay. Now, the height of this again is going to be kind of up to us, but let's say just kind of eyeballing this stuff. Four and a half feet, maybe a little tall, but we can play with that. Let's go 4. Okay. So we got a little table in the corner. That one's going to be like a 1 by 1 foot. Kind of like that. And then over by the door over here, we'll turn the front wall back on. Over by the door, we want to have a lamp. So I'm going to put that right about there. It's a 1 by 1. It's actually going to be a circle. So let's go ahead and make a cylinder instead. I'm going to make this about, just do a 2 inches high base right now. Okay. So that'll be a stand-in. I'm not sure how tall this will be, but it's gonna be a floor lamp, so it'll come up fairly high. And the doorway is actually going to open to the left over here, so it won't get in the way of that. Let's turn our front wall back off. Okay, so now we need to kind of decide what else is important to block in at this point. And most of this is going to be for basic lighting, because I want to get a basic lighting pass finished, and then also an idea as we start to get back into storyboarding for what elements we can play with for the characters in the story, because basically we're going to have the beach ball in here playing around somewhere. We're also going to have some little alphabetic blocks and things like that as characters probably playing around somewhere in here. And we're going to want to kind of define the space in a way that gives us some ideas for when we are storyboarding. And I'm talking in terms of interaction. So the more we have an idea of what our surroundings are, the more we can kind of brainstorm. Well, it would be cool, you know, if the desk was animated and maybe the tabletop, you know, if we grab the edge over here, maybe this is when the tabletop is raised up, but we could actually animate this starting here and then animating up and down as part of maybe a character. You know, obviously anything that moves mechanically can be animated to give it a little bit of life in the story. So it's going to be up to us to decide what works and what doesn't work. And the only way to really get that down is to know what we're working with. So for the rest of tonight, what I'm going to be looking at doing is playing a little bit with some ideas for adding little elements. And then I'm going to move into more of a lighting pass towards the second half of the stream. And so main goal here is to get that first pass finished so we can jump back in and start actually blocking in models, know what we have to get done, we can create a list of things to accomplish for a to-do list, and then we can actually start managing the project. We can start figuring out, okay, how long is this actually going to take me to do, you know, in terms of days, weeks, months, to get this whole thing finished. And then we can start setting milestones for different parts of the project, especially if you're working in a team. That's important, and it's also very important for me as someone working on this by myself, because I want to be able to gauge with several other projects going on at the same time how long it's going to take me to get something done so that I can plan for my other projects. So let's play a little bit more with some other ideas here. Jump at the top view again. Oh, by the way, I created a little 1x1 cube over here, and I'm using that to help me measure feet so I can accurately get an idea like how far things need to be placed apart from each other and how big the room is and all that kind of stuff. So that matches up with the plan I have in Photoshop, which tells me, you know, exactly eyeballing how big things need to be. I'm also looking up, you know, actual dimensions of all these objects on Google as I go through and create these plans. So I had to actually look up, you know, the height of an interior door should be 6 foot 8 inches. And some of this varies, but for my design here, I'm trying to write down specifics. The window needs to be 8 feet off of the floor. That's the top of the window where it ends, needs to come up to 8 feet. And then, you know, the window width should be, you know, 3.5 feet or 36 inches, which is 3 feet, and another ½ inch. And stuff like that. And then I thought about playing with the idea of like slanting the ceiling. So to do that, we would actually have to, you know, bring these walls down and play with that. So maybe later on when we get more of an idea of how the room's going to be laid out, we can decide if that's a good idea or not. But I think for now, we're just going to leave it square. So we're going to work big to small. Bigger objects get blocked in first, and then we can start figuring out, you know, are there going to be clothes laying on the ground? Is there going to be paper? How messy is it going to be? All that kind of stuff. So this might be like a little trash can placed by the drawing desk. So maybe this is about 1.5 feet tall. And, you know, depending on how much time you have, if you want to get in there and start blocking out, you know, pieces of the models, you know, you can do that. The goal is not to, you know, work on creating a finalized version of any of this stuff right now, because again, we don't really need to do that to get an idea of what to keep and what to get rid of. And the more you start to obsess about those details too early, the harder it's going to be to get all the way through this production phase. So I just want to imply what these objects are at this point in time. So I'm still getting used to the new keyboard shortcuts in Blender, and I'm hoping they don't switch them up from the current alpha version too much for the rest of the 2.8 releases. But you know, I'm starting to get used to a lot of, you know, A is now Alt A to get rid of the selection. Flipping normals is not Control N. Control N starts a new file. It's Shift N now to consistently, divert all the normals in the same direction. And there's not currently a shortcut for flip normals. So if we look up normals, I think we're gonna have to be in edit mode to see this. Yeah, so flip normals doesn't actually have a keyboard shortcut yet. So that's exciting and frustrating all at the same time. Okay, so because we may want to play with where the beach ball is located as we get in here, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit with how this is created, this desktop. And just to kind of clear some room underneath, I want to extrude this back in here, and we can go back and, again, fix this later, but for now, that'll do as a sort of indentation for the desktop there. He's probably gonna have a chair of some kind. I'm not sure necessarily how big this should be. Definitely needs to be a cube, not a plane. Let's go 3 feet off the ground. Still don't have local view yet. So again, not going to waste a lot of time modeling this up, but just enough to show that it's a chair. Okay. So I'm trying to think back to, obviously we're going to need to get reference if we get too far into this, but, what did I have in my room when I was a kid, and what type of stuff would be kind of scattered around? And, one of the things I remember seeing a lot in my friends' rooms, I didn't have one of these, but some of those big plastic crayons, and I don't know if they were like banks for like coins that you'd put in, or maybe you just put a bunch of like stuff in there. I'm not really sure, but they came apart and they were huge. So I just thought, all right, well, that reminds me of a kid's room. So let's create one of those. So I'm going to use the spin tool to do this. So basically what we're going to start with is by defining a silhouette for what this shape needs to look like. We can create an entire spinned object off of that. And you can kind of think of this like a pottery wheel for how this kind of works. So we're defining half of the shape here, which means it needs to be a little thinner than we're used to seeing here. So I'm going to scale this in a little bit, pull that down. And then what you'd want to do is snap the cursor to one of these vertices in the middle. So I'm going to cursor to selected, and then I'm going to use the modifier screw. And we're going to do around, let's replace the origin to where that 3D cursor is. And that's going to basically create this little crayon shape here. So now if we look at that, we can set our calc order for our normals to be consistent there to the outside. And then, of course, if you wanted to mess with the number of vertices and all of that, you can change that there. But while this is still live, you can play with all of these settings. And you want to kind of get this dialed in before you get anything applied. That way you're pretty sure that this is the way it needs to look. So I think it needs to be a little skinnier. Maybe something like that is all right. And then if we want to imply, it's probably getting a little too far into this right now, but imply a label is here. Using something like that. And that's probably good for now. So I'm going to go to Object, Shade Smooth, apply that, and then I'm going to create consistent normals there. Okay. So now we can place this somewhere in the room. And what we might do is pull the origin down to the bottom of our shape here. So before I do that, looks like we got some extra edges down here. Merge those at the center. Okay. So grab that middle vertex, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we'll set the origin again to the cursor. Now we can kind of rotate this around the bottom of our crayon, and we can line this up, kind of leaning it on the desk or something like that. You might want to rotate this a little bit more into the wall, something like that. You know, if it looks too fat, we can always skinny this up a little bit. Shrink it down. Remember to apply your scale once you're finished editing. Get that into place. So, I don't know, looks a little weird right now, but captures the idea. We're gonna want a little lamp on the corner over here. So I'm gonna hit Shift D to duplicate our little base. We'll put this on top of our table over here. And I'm gonna scale this down. Something like that. Okay, so at this point might be a decent time to start kind of playing with some customization. So I'm going to select all this stuff. And again, I'm not going to use any subdiv or proper modeling techniques because we're just trying to get the basics implied here. And once we have that done, we can go back and redo all of this stuff. But that's not really what's important right now. Okay, so I'm gonna want to create sort of a lampshade with this. Just gonna extrude that down and out to kind of imply what that looks like. A little bit there. If we need to come in a little bit. up. Okay, and then on the top, I'm going to do an inset. And we're gonna go down to that. Let's delete that face, and then we've got a basic lamp in place. Okay, so I'm not quite sure if it's maybe all of the stuff we have set up over here that's causing that weird artifacting to happen. I feel like it's a normals issue, but yeah, without all the keyboard shortcuts that are normally there, digging through the menus to correct all this stuff right now is kind of going to be a waste of time. So we can confirm that with our normal selection on and off to see what that looks like. I'll shift and pull these back in so they're not so wide, but they're all flipped their correct direction. So I think it's just a shading issue with 2.8 right now. And I'm sure as we switch into different views, you know, you're going to see that go away or come back. So anyways, doesn't really matter at this point. We're just blocking in our basic scene. So turn those back off down here. And probably bring the lamp up a little bit like that. Okay. In the corner, I'm going to do the same basic thing, but we're going to have a taller lamp over here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this object. Start by duplicating the lamp we have on the table over here, and I'm going to place that back in the corner. Now, once again, I want to place this by the door, so I'm going to turn that front wall back on, and then put it kind of next to the light switch. And then let's just get this down onto the floor to get started. Looks like we got a little bit of a mess here with the way that this was extruded, but that's all right. Yeah, it got pulled over a little bit far when we were extruding by accident, but that's okay. Can expand that selection. And I'm going to deselect these interior loops. Then we can reposition this where it needs to go. Once again, let's get rid of that selection down in there. And let's pull this back over. Okay. So now let us pull the top of this shade up to where it needs to be height-wise. Might make it a little bit bigger. Maybe stretch the height out a little bit there. And we can kind of say, you know, this needs to be height-wise. We'll apply the scale and then see how many feet up this is looking to be. So about 6 feet off the ground, 6.5 feet off the ground right now, which I think is probably a little low. Maybe we want to make it about that high over there. I'm going to bring in my 1x1 cube to kind of give me some scale to go off of here. And the base needs to be about the size of this 1x1. Okay, so scale that up. Deselect everything except for the top of our little post here, and then we'll pull that up into the lamp. Okay, save our set. And let's move on. Okay, so to confirm, you know, we're still in a good place. Make sure nothing's running into the wall like we have here. Move that forward a little bit. And, you know, the height of the door is, you know, going to be roughly equivalent, a little bit higher than an adult person walking through the door. So if this is too high based on that, you know, obviously we want to fix that. And so, again, this is why we're blocking and we're not modeling right now. Because we don't want to get too crazy with details when we don't even have the basic configuration set up yet. And we may very well decide to get rid of some of this furniture. I mean, maybe there's not enough room for everything that I'm thinking about in the room. You know, with the door opening, we have to figure out distance because we don't want the door running into the base of this bed. So yeah, all of that is kind of going to the walls. We'll shift this over. And there we go. Got that blocked in. So at some point when we're kind of getting in here and messing with things, it's nice to turn the ceiling back on, jump back into our preview camera, and then start doing a preview render of kind of what we're seeing. What I did before, I'm not sure if I did this on the live stream or not, but I was playing with a little bit of the intensity settings for our sun and some of the colors. So what I did was I set up a basic portal light that you guys are probably familiar with cycles, put that in the window in terms of the scale of our window here, have a sun lamp behind that pouring in a little bit of blue light. So if we were to select that, you can kind of see I'm doing a little bit of a grayish blue to tint that like it's a rainy day. And then I've got some light pouring in from a spotlight from the other side of our door to this kid's bedroom. And so this is spilling in from the hallway and giving us a little bit more light there. Now we have to remember we're obviously using matte caps. So as we're playing with these settings with cycles, we're not going to get a super accurate rendition of anything yet because in our view here, we're using matte caps, and then with the cycles set up, we're all using the same material on every surface. So every new object is basically getting the same material that we're creating. And if they're not, they need to be kind of sharing this. So I'm going to hit Control L and copy this material from the monkey onto every single object we have in the scene. And that way when we render, they're all sharing that same sort of reflected material. And that's just a basic principle of BSDF. And I turned the roughness down a little bit so that they're a little bit more reflective. And that way we're getting a little bit of a hint of kind of what the bounce light's going to look like and all that stuff. And in the preview window, when you're rendering, of course, you can turn off overlays, and that will basically do a render-only preview there. And so this is good just to kind of give you an idea with the portal lighting. You know, is this going to be kind of enough bouncing around the room to illuminate all the objects we already have in there? We have some practicals in the scene now. So now that we have a couple of lamps, we can start setting up some lighting for that. And so before I get too far along with the rest of the scene, let's go ahead and start talking about some lighting. Now, one of the unfortunate downsides of working at 2.8 right now is that my current graphics card is not supported for GPU rendering. So all of the rendering that I'm doing is CPU based, which is really, really slow. So if I even try to set this to a GPU render, it'll just crash. So if you have an AMD card, you might find that that's not implemented yet, but of course we're working towards the future release, so that will be coming. But just so you guys know, that is a limitation right now. Okay, so let's start playing with some of the other lighting. I'm gonna turn the ceiling off, and let's hide some of this other stuff. So in here, I'm gonna take all of our objects that we've been adding in here. I'm going to move those into the bedroom collection. And all this stuff, let's move this into a new collection, and we'll call this props. So that way at any point in time, if we want to turn these on and off, we can basically just toggle these like that. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my camera and my lights so we can see that with the overlays turned on. As you can see, again, we got a spotlight here, sun lamp here, and this is a portal indicating cycles what an interior room should look like. And so let's put some practical lights in these lights over here. So we're going to use point lights for that. I'm gonna go ahead and move my 3D cursor to around where these would need to be. Shift A, just insert a light. We're gonna use point light. Put that sort of over here, and where that would need to be in the lamp. And we might use 2 in this case. Maybe there's 2 bulbs in this lamp. And let's play with some of the lighting now. Now I am using Filmic with a base contrast, and currently I had curves turned on, so I'm going to turn those off for now. And instead what I might do is use that as we start playing with the settings. So switch back into this camera here, turn our ceiling back on. Let's see what these do. Okay, now these are going to need to be tinted a little bit more towards the warm side. So if we want to get really accurate with this, we could plug in an actual Kelvin temperature for the light to do that. So if you really want to do that, and you're getting into filmmaking and you know what that means, let me kind of show you what you would do there. So we can go to the shader editor, and under the color here, we would use an input, and we would do a, what am I looking for? Maybe it's not input, maybe it's color. I think what I'm looking for is black value, black body. Yeah, so a black body will give you the ability to indicate color temperature, which you can plug straight into here. So typically indoors, you're looking at maybe 3200 for a Kelvin scale for things that are more warm cast. So if we were to render now, you can see kind of what that looks like. And I'd want to do the same thing for my other light as well. So if we're looking at this point light, under the setting here, maybe for the lamp, we would name this interior warm lamp. And I'm going to disable that real fast. And if we jump back into the top view here and grab that other light that we added, we want to have the same settings. So we'll right click this, and we'll choose interior warm lamp for that as well. And yeah, there it goes. So now these should both share that same light property for basically the material for the light, and they'll still be labeled different lights, so we still have those separated. Now, any light that we want to add that has that sort of warm bulb, we can just duplicate one of these, put it over into here, and drop that into place. Now, this should also copy the strength, so if we make an adjustment to the strength in one of these, it will be the same for all of these. Which may not be desirable, but we can obviously split that off if we want to as we play with this a little bit. So if this is way too bright, we can crank this down. That's get a base in place. So we're going to need to turn the ceiling back on to get an accurate view of how this is bouncing around the room. Also, if you're not capping off openings in the room, like there's an open doorway for the closet here, and the ceiling is bleeding over and is not covering the closet, you're going to be losing light out of there too. So you want to make sure you're kind of paying attention to that stuff. So I forgot to cap this off. So let's go ahead and extrude the ceiling back over to also cover the closet. And you'd want to, if you didn't have lights coming in through this part of the doorway and you wanted to, again, see the room completely closed off, you'd want to create a doorway to block that as well. And the window would have an effect, but not tons. So now we'll get a more accurate readout of how this light is interacting. So again, apologize for CPU rendering right now because this is going to be fairly slow as this updates, but it should give you an idea of, whether we're accomplishing what we need to accomplish. Okay, I'm gonna lower the lamp over here quite a bit lower. Might even go down to 1. I just want it kind of subtly lighting up that area of the room. And right now it's doing quite a bit more than I would want. In fact, maybe we don't even need lights over there, but let's take that way down to a 0.1. Okay. The rest of that light's probably coming from the light bulbs in the other lamp. So that would be these two. And I'm going to take those down to about maybe a 1 and a 1. If we want to have this on. We might not even want to have these on. So I'll have to check that out. Okay. Yeah, so we're getting way less of an influence from that light now. And of course, that light way over by the wall is pretty dim. Let's turn that back up. Yeah, I think that's better. Get a little bit of a cast on the wall there, which is nice. And, you know, kind of what we need there. If we want, we can pull this down a little bit so that it's kind of splitting the cast between the bottom and the top. And then what I may want to do is move the camera so that we are able to see from the other side of the room. Let's turn our overlays back on. Might just duplicate a camera, rotate that around, and then look from this angle. Okay, let's turn our ceiling back on. Okay, yeah, so not much of an effect at all from those other lights. So let's bring that down a bit, and bring this one down a bit as well. Okay, so let's turn these up a little bit. It's kind of one of those situations where you wonder on the inside of a rainy day in a darker room. Sometimes you turn lights on and things like that, and it's one of those feelings like it doesn't even help, you know? So we're going for that gloomy, kind of sad, dim interior look. And some of that's going to happen with color correction. So obviously when we come over into the filmic range here, we're using a base contrast right now. You can go up to very high contrast, which is going to give you a lot more of that final look. But when you render, I actually usually render it with a very, very low contrast. And that way I can do all of my color correction in post. And so at this point, you can come back in with curves and do really extreme color correction because you've got all that contrast range to deal with. So if you really want to create a dark interior with a lot of shadowy contrast, this would be the way to do it. Take your black level, start it over here to where you're just getting a silhouette of that doorway. And again, you don't want to clip your blacks too much, but a tiny bit on a render like this is not too bad. And you can see you can just really get in here and start to add some moody lighting with the scene without a lot of effort. So yeah, so that's what it looks like currently from the other point of view. If we want to select the other camera, we can switch back and see what it looks like from this angle. And of course, we have to keep in mind, the story may not be 100% taking place on just a rainy day. Maybe we're transitioning at some point in the story from a sunny day to a rainy day. And depending on how that goes, we need to accommodate for that as we build this set. We need to see, all right, well, at this point in the movie, we want this to be bright and happy. And then we need to have a lighting set design for that. And then at this other point in the movie, when we transition, we need to have a way to transition with animating the lights. And then we also need to have an after where the lights are sort of set up to be dark and gloomy and all of that. So all of that goes into the set design process. Move this bed down a little bit. Okay, so let's turn some of this stuff back off again. And save. And now we can get into maybe placing some doors and things like that for different parts of the scene. So I'm gonna block some of this in. Again, we're not gonna get detailed, but just so we can get an idea of how this is gonna work, I want to have these in place. So I'm gonna turn my overlays back on so I can see where all this goes. And then let's position the door. We're going to create a simple cube for this right now. And most importantly is going to be nailing the kind of thickness of this and then where it pivots. So based on the plan that we created here, in the corners where the hinges for the door are going to be in this room. And so it's going to open to the left, making sure that we're not going to collide with anything else in the room over here. So pull that out. Typically with a door, you're going to have a jamb sort of in the middle on both sides that prevents the door from going past certain points, which means that it's sort of inset to either the inside or the outside, depending on which way that it opens. So in this case, we're going to have it inset a little bit. And then we're going to want to position this inside of our door opening. Okay, I'll get rid of our editor down there because we don't really need that anymore. Let's hop into edit mode so it's a little faster to edit this. Okay, so just so I kind of know where we are and what all this looks like for this wall, I'm going to go ahead and create those little door jambs just so that those are kind of in place. We can do that pretty easily by just scaling the height of this, or the width of this in, and then just moving this back into the wall. Select that, move it over to the other side. That's kind of the tough part about this stage of modeling all of this stuff, is that the more you get into placing things at the final stages of the block and all of that, the more accurate you're going to have to start getting. to make sure that things are where they need to be. All right, so hinges would go somewhere around here, and then again, we're gonna need to replace the way this is pivoting. So I'm gonna select these two vertices, hit Shift S, cursor is selected to snap the cursor between them, and then I'm gonna set the origin to the 3D cursor. So now when we rotate this door, it's gonna open inward and like this. And then ideally, when it comes back, it's gonna stop as it hits this door jamb on the inside of our wall. So it's kind of cool. You can actually see the shadows being animated as this opens. So it would come in, and we could put a door stop somewhere or max out the ability to pivot on the hinge somewhere, but maybe right around there is about as wide as it goes. We're also going to need to accommodate the door now with the trim. So as we have made some changes there, we need to kind of update this stuff. And the hinges are typically going to be sort of in the middle of this. So again, as we get further into modeling, we're going to have to arrange, so that this actually works. But I'm going to look up reference for the hinges and worry about all that later. All right, so for now, I think that's probably a good position for that. And then, of course, you can just animate the Z rotation right now to kind of get this back into place. So zero that out if you want to close the door. We can do the same thing for the window. Let's go ahead and create some closet doors. So I'm just going to start by duplicating our front door here. I'll rotate this by -90. Apply the scale and rotation on both of these. Okay, now this one, they're going to open up opposite. So this is going to open up out here, and this is going to open up out here, and they're going to open up to the outside. So I want to position the hinges right around here. And I'm going to duplicate this, move it over. Let's just scale it by -1 in the y-axis, which will just flip this door across the y-axis. And we'll probably have to fix the normals on this, but hit Shift N to make this consistent. And then all I want to do now is set this to individual origins, and let's scale along the y-axis until those doors sort of meet in the middle. Something kind of like that. So let's also hop into edit mode. For now, I'm going to join these together so they're one object. I'm going to grab all of these, move them up. So let's turn off our left wall. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and select one of these, hit P and separate by selection. And that will have changed our rotation to be around this origin. So once again, we're going to want to set our origin as outside. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side because the origin's a little lower than directly in the middle. Now we have our closet doors, which will open up this way. Okay, so hit Alt-R to clear those rotations, and that way they will be closed like that. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and get in here and imply that we've got some knobs in place. So rotate these 90 degrees. Go ahead and get rid of half of this. So that's a quick way to place the door knobs and where they need to go. Again, reset those origins to the correct place. I will shade smooth, which is not going to be super noticeable with the wireframes turned on, but when you turn those off, you can see that. Now we can just get those sort of centered into the right place on the door. So something kind of like that for now. And that's an easy block in. Parent these to the door. So shift select the door last, Control P, object keep transform. And now when you rotate the door, the knobs will go with it. So if you really want to get fancy, you can lock the rotation for each of the doors so that it's only going to be able to be rotated on the Z-axis. And then whenever you select the door and hit R, it's only going to allow you, no matter which angle you're rotated, to rotate around that Z-axis. So if you're looking for a quick way to set things up that will kind of be rigged and not breakable for your block-in, that's a good way to do it. So same thing here for this door. We'll go ahead and do a similar thing for the doorknob. So I'm going to create a UV sphere. Deselect all of that. And if you're just popping in the stream, we're creating a basic set design tonight for our animated short. And so nothing that we're doing tonight is going to be part of the final model. It's just going to be helping us block in the set for lighting and posing and character development and working on storyboarding and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you guys a little bit later before we end the stream at 9, kind of how I'm going to use this further in my storyboarding endeavors. Scale this down to about the right size. Let's get this positioned on the door. Again, I'm just guessing it where this goes. Not really important right now. Okay, so once again, grab the doorknob, shift right, select the door, Control P, object keep transform, and there we go. We've got a basic door in place. All right. Let's move back into the other camera view for now. Right click, Control 0. Let's go over here. Once again, if we start rendering, we're going to need to turn on our ceiling. But now with the doors in place, you can see what a difference that makes to the lighting. So before you start really getting things locked in for your final numbers, especially at this block-in stage, you want to make sure all those holes are covered up. So the two big things we did were we added doors to the last parts of the room so that all the rest of the holes were in place. And then in the closet, we extended the ceiling back so that it covered the top of the closet. So there was no light leaks there. So the only light opening that we actually have in the room right now is the window. And you can see that in the reflection from this angle. So we can see just from that, we really got to crank up our numbers here for our lights. So I'm going to go ahead and start labeling these a little bit. So let's go over here, see where this is. Hit period on the numpad to jump to that, the light here. So we've got our sun that's actually in the wall right now in that collection. So I don't want a new collection. So let's hit M. We'll go to the bedroom, and maybe outside the bedroom, we'll create a new collection. We'll call this exterior lights. Props, I want inside the bedroom. So I'm going to hit M, move that to the bedroom. And so now whenever we collapse the bedroom, I'm going to move that manually because that didn't work. So turn the ceiling off here. You can see all of our props are in their own collection now. Turn that on and off. And that's all under the bedroom. So if I turn the bedroom off, we're just going to have the exterior lights showing. So this is also going to be one of the exterior lights as well as the portal. So we'll move those into that collection. And then the interior lights are going to be part of the bedroom. So they're currently under props, or where are they? Move this into a new collection. Let's do interior lights. Okay. And those are, there we go, part of the bedroom. And I've got two more to add in the lamp over here. So I'll select both of these and then move those into there. And we're good to go. Okay. So now I should be pretty easy to jump in and grab the lights when we need to tweak the values. So from the exterior point of view, as we start rendering, we're going to need to crank up the sun. We're also using the world here to affect the outside. So if we're not getting enough daylight spilling in from the sky, this value needs to go up. So if we crank that up to 4, you can see how much more blue light is spilling in from the outside. So if you really want to light the room up using that, this is where you need to go do that. And it's this plus the sun as a combination of what this looks like. So if we go up to like 10, we're going to get really, really, overcast lighting coming in through the window. And you can see how much that's kind of bouncing around and affecting things there. Now the light that we had coming in through the door is not even affecting anything because again, it can't see anything right now. So I think this is a good start for what I'm trying to aim for. I don't have enough of the sun coming through yet, so I want to grab the sun and also play with this color. And I'm going to go a little bit warmer now with the way that this looks. And maybe let's bring this up to about 2. Kind of see what that's doing. So we want a little bit of a mix. You can see the square on the floor that's a little bit lighter is actually what the sunlight kind of looks like coming through. That's casting that shadow from the interior of the window onto the floor. And let's go ahead and turn down the interior lights now so we can just focus on the outside lighting. So I'm just going to turn those off. So we're just seeing what the rainy day looks like coming in through the window. And at any point in time, if you want to open one of these doors to see what's going on, you can select it and then again rotate, and you can see what it looks like with the outside trickling in. So if we're going to have this door open at any point during the animation, we're probably going to need to build out more of the house. And again, that's 2 reasons. You want to see the background through the doorway if we ever shoot this way. We also want to enclose the room and the rest of the house so that the outside light is not spilling in too far to affect the rest of the scene, because it's going to start feeling really unrealistic. It's the same thing for this. As we open this up, you're not going to see any light coming in from here, but you're going to be able to see more light bouncing into the closet. So again, all that changes and affects things in terms of your lighting. So this is actually a really good scene to kind of demonstrate how to cinematically light a shot. Okay, so I might even crank this up a little more. Now, bear in mind, we've also changed some of the curves. So if we turn the curves off with like a base contrast, this is more akin to what your actual lighting is going to come off when you're rendering. So don't forget to make sure you have that switched off if you're trying to preview your actual lighting for the scene. When you get into final compositing, this is good for helping you determine what color correction will look like, but you definitely don't need to have that on when you're trying to preview what this looks like. Okay, so let's play a little bit more with this mix. So even by just going a little bit like that, you can see what the sun looks like trickling in through the window on sort of a rainy day. Now, if that's too happy, again, you got options. You can lower the intensity, which will keep the same brightness and color, but it will lower the effectiveness of the light. So if we go down to like a 0.5, you can see it start to fade out, and the color intensity is still there, right? But the amount of the effect that it's having on the scene is lower. You can also go the other way. So if you want to turn this back up to 2, you can lower the saturation by going back towards the middle, make it a little bit more of a gray light, and then lower the brightness of the light in terms of the color. And that will give you sort of another way to dim the light effect here. And it all really kind of depends on, first locking in what you need to have the light doing to your shadows. And then once that's finished, you can start toning down the intensity of the light using those other settings with the color. So really wish my GPU was working right now for 2.8, because it would be a lot faster to preview this stuff, but oh well. If you're interested, in doing the same sort of thing, I'd recommend using Eevee, because that actually is working right now with my card. And so if you're an AMD customer and you have an AMD card, that's why I mentioned that, because NVIDIA will do everything right now pretty much, but yeah, my AMD system is not wanting to cooperate. Okay, let's go a little darker with the actual background lighting coming in through the window, and I might go a little bit more saturated as well, a little bit bluer with that light. So this is a great example of like how you would light an interior and the settings you would use on your lamps and how wildly different they would be compared to doing an exterior. And that's because, again, when you're exposing for one versus the other, you're not typically going to switch between an inside and an outside shot in the same actual shot. You'd cut to another camera view, which was outside, and then you'd have a completely different setup. But it's not like we're flying from inside the window outside or outside the window inside. And if we were going to do that, we would have to create an interesting way to transition there, because the exposure is really what's going to dictate how that's an issue. Now, if we get into the film setting down here, you've also got the ability to change the exposure in terms of the image brightness. And so this, along with everything else that we're talking about, can change the way everything looks. And it's important that you kind of lock in your settings and you don't play with all of them all at the same time, because if you do that, you're going to lose the ability to kind of track what's going on. But you can see as I lower this down in terms of the exposure, we could go really, really low, and it would be almost like a nighttime shot with this like this. or we can, again, go super bright and it would be kind of overexposed and happy and all of that. And that's just, again, it's another trick you have to play with. So if your lighting isn't doing it for you, you can actually play with the exposure here. And again, if you want to, you can actually animate this. You can insert a keyframe, and this is something that actual cinematographers would animate using the aperture and things like that on their cameras when they're shooting a shot. So this would be an example of how we would switch between outdoors to flying through a window, going into an interior scene like this. Okay, I think this is a good start. So let's turn that off. Loving this shading preview here with all of this stuff. This is a great little toony setup, liking that a lot. So yeah, lots of cool stuff here to play with in the new Blender. It's fun. Okay. So let me talk a little bit more about how I would use this when I get back into storyboarding. If you follow the previous streams, you probably know that with storyboards, I've been playing with some ideas. And so if I remember where these are, okay. So we have a whole stream going back a couple of streams ago that talks about the development of the story and what my thought process is as I got in here live and I kind of sketched all of these little scenes out. So this will change a lot as we get in and start playing with the story. But what I like about what we've done tonight is that I've got a solid basis for getting in here and quickly drawing up more storyboards. And we can combine the 3D process in with the 2D process to really quickly block in some awesome stories. So what I would probably do is get a nice looking shaded overlay with everything blocked in like this. Probably turn off all of my overlays with the wireframes and all that kind of stuff so that I'm just looking at my geometry. And then if I can get any sort of shading information still in there, you know, that's obviously great for a preview. And then what I want to do is switch out of orthographic mode in my preview here using 5. And I can kind of preview what this would look like with different focal lengths for my camera right here. Now, if you want to, you can go so far as to creating all of your custom camera views that you would use in the scene like you would do on a film set. And so in that case, what we would do is we would say, all right, let's pull back just our camera. I'm going to turn the rest of the stuff off. So we're just looking at the camera here. So those are still visible. Turn off the wireframes. And then, so these two are already set up, right? So let's get this locked into view. Once again, we'll turn that off. And then what we have here is we've got a view kind of locked in from a set off camera viewpoint that we can use for overlays when we're storyboarding. So turn that back on. We would go to render. We could do a OpenGL render, which I'm not sure if that's currently implemented in this version of 2.8 yet. But another thing you can do if you're not seeing that is use some screen grab tool. So in this case, I might pull this up, pull this over here so you guys can see this, and I might do a rectangular snip. And then I would just follow my camera dimensions here. Copy that, pull that into Photoshop, and then I've got a camera angle sort of locked off. And so what's great about this is that now I've got that camera view kind of perfectly locked in. We've got really no characters in place. All we're looking at is toys and you know, set pieces that are going to stay where they are for the most part in the final. And so now that this is in place, if I want to come back in and draw on top of it, then I've already got a good starting point. So let me grab my pen and kind of show you what the upside of this is. So I'm going to shrink this down to where it's sort of in place here. turn back on our little frames here. So we have a bunch of blank frames. So I've got my background and I've got my my frame, and then I've got my blank layer in the middle there. So I'll just go ahead and squeeze that so we can see kind of what that looks like. And now what happens is like I've got plenty of these to play with. So if I want to duplicate this off, then I can create 5 or 6 camera angles, and then each one of these allows me to go back in and say, all right, basically at this point, I want the ball to start, you know, here, and we're going to have it sort of looking out the window. It's going to be sad or whatever. And then something's going to happen down here, and it's going to look, and then in the next frame, we're going to have the ball sort of hop off the window, jump down, and it's going to land on the floor. And I've saved myself all of that time having to redraw the set because I've already got those in place. So if we're just going to be animating the main characters, obviously you'd want to do something like this if you've already built the set in 3D and use it to your advantage, because you know, half the trouble last time was having to redraw every single set piece from all these different angles. And so it'd be much easier to just move the camera, get a screen grab, and then start from there. And then you can say, all right, well, now when it's come over here, it's going to land on the bed. And you can kind of do this as you go as well. So if we know that the ball is going to land over there, jump back into Blender and go, all right, let's take the camera, duplicate it, make sure we're looking through that camera. Let's put it over here. And now we can kind of like reposition where this needs to look using the angle here. So if the beach ball is now sitting and we're looking from the point of view of the beach ball, we can kind of frame up what we want to frame up. And then again, it's perfect. You know, we've got that all locked in. Quickly turn off what we don't want to see. And then do another frame grab. And if you're trying to do really accurate storyboards, drawing them is doable, but it's not fun all the time. It's not always easy. And so doing it this way, again, gives you the ability to go, all right, well, let's focus on what we need to focus on. You know, let's spend our time drawing the characters and what they're doing, and then let's use, you know, the rest of our time to do what we need to do. So once again, got that in place. Jump back onto my layer with my ball, and then we can go, all right, well, the ball's going to be here, and we're going to do an over-the-shoulder shot of that ball. And then he's going to be looking off into the distance, and here's where the window would be, and the rain and stuff like that. But again, you know, that's what I would use this for. So hopefully that helps a little bit if you're looking for ways to kind of speed up your workflow for your own animated shorts. Again, I would really recommend getting in here and taking the time to block out measurements for the scene. If you're going to do interiors with a house or whatever, measure things, you know, look them up online, get down to the inch, you know, centimeter, millimeter, whatever units you're using, and make sure that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff. Because if you start off on the right foot that way, then you're going to be much more accurate. Things are going to fall into place much easier as you get further along in development with your short, because you'll have things just kind of work. And that's kind of the goal here, is to get things easy. So you're moving from one part of the process to the next without having to reinvent the wheel every time you do something. So when it comes time to actually model these doors, I might even be able to use these doors as a starting point, go back in, touch things up, and I'm done, instead of having to completely rebuild these. And what's great is, like, every step of the way, I've got something to show off, you know? So if I want to share this online, show people an update, if I'm trying to do this in a group and my guys who are animating want to know, all right, what is the layout of the room? And I don't just want it on paper. I want to see it in 3D so I can start figuring out what is going to happen with the rig. Then I can pass this early version of the room off to the animators and things like that, and they can start getting final things in place for their animation. Same thing with the people who are going to do lighting. If you've got other modelers helping you create all the detailed pieces for the room, you can pass off something simple. They can create the detailed version, and then you can just start swapping stuff in and out as you are building things, instead of having to bottleneck the process all in one place, and then they're all waiting on you to like get done with the rest of this so you can pass it off. And so it's great to be able to kind of modularly jump back and forth and update things as you go, and that way it's a little bit more organized, and we're speeding this through the pipeline. All right, so there's quite a bit more I'm gonna need to do to get this room, kind of get it in place. As far as brainstorming what we're gonna do with the sets, I'm not quite sure what else we're gonna put in the room. I know we're gonna probably have to scatter toys and stuff all around, but all I'm gonna be doing at this point is continuing what I've showed you, blocking in the pieces for the like hangers and clothes and hanging posters on the wall and little things like that, just so we get an idea of what the decoration is going to look like. And the goal is to just get as many of those things checked off the list and done as fast as possible until we're like 80% of the way there. And then it's like, all right, we finished this up to a point where we know where we're headed. Do we really need to keep doing the last 20%? If the answer is no, and we have an idea enough to get going on the actual next step of the production process, which would be modeling all of these pieces out to their final form, then let's just move on. Let's move on. And if there's anything we have to add last second, it won't be because we haven't thought it through. It'll be because somebody makes a creative decision that's justified, we changed our mind, or we want to add something in that we think will add to the scene that we've already established and all of that. And ultimately, that's really what the whole point of tonight is to establish a plan so that you're not going to get in over your head as you get into the next part of the process. Because once you start modeling and texturing, UV layouts, all that stuff, if you have to go back and start over on a model, and I've done this a lot for clients and stuff like that, where they change their mind or whatever, it's so frustrating to have put so many hours into a model and then have to go back and fix it because somebody wasn't able to make a definitive call early on in the process. And so that's what you're doing for yourself. You're deciding early on, do I want this? Do I not want this? If I want it to be over here versus over here, and that's going to change part of the model, sometimes that happens, then I make those decisions now, not later. And then after I've got those decisions kind of locked and we've decided, yeah, this is good, we've moved on from that. And then we're just polishing. And polishing is where you get to be laid back, easygoing. It's,